So, Alan, firstly, a big, massive, warm welcome onto the Legal Brew. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, I must say from the get-go, I've been very excited to have you come onto the Legal Brew since we last spoke, because I think we're going to have a really great conversation today, and I think it's going to help a lot of people because you've done a lot in your career, and there's a lot I want to talk to you about. So, I guess firstly, do you obviously at the moment you manage the Scottish office for an absolutely massive international firm, which I'm sure
Yeah.
most people listening to this have heard of, which is CMS. I guess first of all, let's talk about your career and walk us through kind of how you've got to where you are. Very open question. I appreciate I'm starting open at the beginning, but take us back in time to you as a junior lawyer and what walk us through some of the highs and lows and the career moments of your career.
My goodness. Yeah. Okay. So going back a long way. So I've been with the firm for just over 28 years. Before that, I studied in Aberdeen, and I qualified. Well, I came out of university looking for a traineeship right at the kind of peak of the early 90s recession. Took the very first job that came along, a relatively small firm in Aberdeen, but I had a really great time there. Decided that I really wanted to move back to the Central Belt, move back to Glasgow. Got a job with a firm in Edinburgh, and the week before I was due to start there, I went on holiday to Ibiza with my friends. And I came back. My dad picked me up from the airport and said to me, "Bad news, you've just got a letter saying that job you thought you were starting on Monday is no longer there." So I then took a bit of a career detour, taking the very first job that was available to me, and that was to do a commercial conveyancing slash criminal defence position at a small firm in Paisley. And I used to say to people that I had more stories in 3 months there than I had in almost 3 decades at firm. Quite a colourful opportunity is one way to put it. But actually, it was a real lesson for me in the choices that I had made and the things I really wanted to focus on. And having that experience of being in an environment which actually just wasn't for me was really, really valuable and helped me kind of make really good decisions after that. So I left there. I think I handed my notice at 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and I was out by 4:30, and then started at what was Dundas and Wilson in Edinburgh back in January '96 as a commercial property assistant, as we would have been called back then.
Do you know what? It's really interesting that the very beginning of your story, because I've had situations like that in my career, and it happens to people. You think that you've got one thing set in stone, that you've worked very hard for, and then all of a sudden you're thrown an absolutely massive curveball. How did you deal with that? Because obviously, your dreams were in somewhat dashed, and you've gone from having something that was concrete and certain to having something that was not what you wanted. You took the first thing that you could, which is understandable.
Yeah, and I think there was probably a bit of naivety at that age. I was relatively young. I qualified when I was 23, so I probably went at it with a bit more of oh well, I'll sort something out, but I better get a job. I kind of I actually thought about suing the company for breach of contract that had employed me and decided to let me go at the last minute, and I actually got some advice on legal aid at the time because I wasn't employed for a few weeks. And the advice I got was you don't want to go suing other law firms because it'll have an impact on your career, because that sort of thing gets round. And actually, utter nonsense, absolute utter nonsense. But interesting to get poor advice at that stage, I thought, as well. But I think you just get up and get on with it. I realised very quickly that the criminal defence environment just wasn't for me. It wasn't an area where I wanted to practice. It wasn't something I'd done as a trainee. The people I worked with I didn't particularly enjoy. So it was something that, as I say, it was a bit of a galvanising experience, because it did make me think I better get my finger out and fix this and get myself a job in an area that I actually want to specialise in.
Was it difficult for you to change practice areas? Because that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, again, the naivety of being young comes into it quite a lot, and you just kind of get on with it. But when you're standing in a police station taking a statement from a potential client, when you've done none of that before, it's quite an experience. So I learned a lot from that, and I think you've got to. You've got to see these opportunities as kind of, in hindsight, a great learning moment for me.
Hmm. So you went over to Dundas and Wilson
Yeah,
and joined them in real estate. So you went
yeah,
from a contentious practice area to a
yeah,
non-contentious practice
yeah.
area. What was your drive for wanting to go into real estate? What was it about that was attracting you?
Yeah, so and again, kind of, I think we often, certainly, I think nowadays we specialise far too early in our careers, and I think we're asked to pick a fairly narrow area of practice, before we've really had a chance to work out what's right. But I had worked with one of the senior partners at the firm that was within Aberdeen on a number of kind of corporate and property transactions. And I remember buying a restaurant for a family in Aberdeen, and was doing a sort of, I think it was a buy-to-let transaction off the back of it. And at the same time, I was dealing with a kind of a transfer of a shop in Dundee. And actually, the thing that I really liked about property was the fact that it was quite tangible. You could touch and see it, you could walk past it. And to me, I just kind of appealed to my brain that I could actually look at things and say, yeah, I was involved in that. Whereas I found the kind of more corporate stuff just a little bit more esoteric and not quite as kind of, something that you can actually kind of connect with. So it was as simple as that. I bought a restaurant for someone, quite enjoyed the transaction, quite enjoyed the experience, the people that I came across. I got really good client contact, and I thought, actually, I'll give this a go.
And to talk us through your journey to partnership, because there's going to be a lot of people listening to this who, that is where they're trying to get to.
Yeah,
That is their ultimate aspiration.
yeah, no, that's a good question. So I started in Edinburgh, and then took an opportunity to go and work with a firm in London, because we had an office down there at the time. And I think through that time, actually was given quite a lot of really good opportunities to kind of get close to clients. The partner I was working with was very hands off. I mean, he did occasionally get involved in things and keep me right, but kind of left me to it to build my own relationships, to really kind of connect well with clients. And I think that sense of sort of building a sort of reputation and a contact base early in your career has served me massively well throughout. I've got clients now who I knew when they were junior surveyors or junior accountants 25 years ago, when I was a junior lawyer, and they're now fund managers and property directors and things like that. That actually, starting early in terms of building personal relationships, particularly in real estate, because it is still very much relationship driven in terms of how people buy services. It's been really useful to kind of just keep that sort of personal connection going with people and deliver a good service. And that I think is the foundation for any business case for making a partner.
It sounds like the partner did you a favor in a roundabout way there by sort
Yeah,
of just throwing you into the deep end, so to speak.
yeah, he very much had a mindset of kind of, giving people room and actually bringing people on as well. And so giving you that opportunity. So, I'm hugely grateful for all of that.
Do you? We will probably throughout the course of this conversation go down a few different rabbit holes at different
Yes.
times, because that's the nature of I guess talking through someone's experience. But to stay on the subject of partnership, then,
Yeah.
how much? Because one of the big things that we come across, being in the position of speaking to candidates every day, is a lot of people want to get to partnership, and I'm like you, believe that a lot of that is driven by someone's client base or whatever.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of candidates out there where the partner takes the lead. It's very partner led. The partner controls all the relationships. How does what? How would one get to partnership if they're not getting the level of exposure to being able to develop their own clients? Or am I asking you an impossible question?
I think that is possibly for us and for our environment an impossible question. And I think we've very much got a culture of letting people kind of get close to clients, build their own relationships. We're very encouraging in terms of telling our junior associates that they are, they're free to build relationships. It's not that you want a two-year qualified lawyer necessarily having to go out and sort of make friends with a CEO. They just need to go and make friends with a two-year qualified accountant or someone else in whatever their relevant profession is, and let those relationships mature with them. And as they become more experienced, I think one of the things I've learned is that actually the people that buy legal services shifts with the generations as well. So if you don't do that, then the people that are buying services today are perhaps my contemporaries, but they're also the contemporaries of people who are 10 years younger than me. And if they weren't given the opportunity to build relationships, then what does that do to the sort of longevity of the business? So I think you've got to be in an environment where that's encouraged. I think that's important. I think for me, the other piece is being not being fixated on going out and winning something on your own account. It's not about going out the street with a sandwich board and winning a new client. It's actually working collaboratively with colleagues. And I quite often to say to people internally who are coming through to partnership, what can I get you through? Is being at the scene of success, is being instrumental to success, and being part of that identification and winning of new opportunities. And I also think there's a bit nowadays of having a USP of some sort, whether that's within real estate, it's a broad, it's a broad spectrum of things that we do. We act for investors, developers, energy companies, occupiers, and there's all sorts of issues that come up as well that potentially need someone to focus on, whether that's around energy efficiency, whether it's around building standards, or whether it's around taxation or something like that. Find a niche that actually makes you valuable to the business is another part of it. So I think part of it for me, and it's different if you're not in transactional areas. Perhaps if you're in disputes, it's slightly different. But if you're in a transactional area, I think it's partly about having a USP and partly about building that really solid relationship and contact base and being at the scene of a success. Those are the kind of core ingredients that I certainly look for.
I think you make some interesting points there. I think that one thing that I hadn't thought of myself was you obviously said that I would have assumed as a 2-year PQE, or let's not say 2 years PQE because that's a bit junior, but let's say a 5-year PQE, I would need to be going out and winning relationships with board level people because naturally they're who are going to make the purchasing decisions. But you make an interesting point by saying a 2-year PQE would go and make friends with people of a similar level, which actually makes the whole prospect of business development seem a hell of a lot more less daunting.
Absolutely. And we've got an initiative actually at the moment in Scotland where it's very much associate led. And we've said to them, look, just fill the room with people they might not be buyers, might not even be clients, but as long as they're in a sort of an environment where that has the potential, then just practice these skills and build a network, because you never know where these people will end up. You never know where you'll end up yourself. And actually, it's just taking that or a really long game sort of approach to it and being really patient, I think, is really important.
I think you make some really interesting points there. And I think that what you also said about niches, a lot of candidates or lawyers that I've come across want to a lot of the time shy away from a niche. And my advice has always been, become a real specialist in something, because that differentiates you between, that and your peers. I sometimes think being really broad isn't necessarily always a good thing. I guess there's pros and there's cons to both.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly early in careers, I think I said it earlier, that I do worry that people specialise a bit too early, perhaps before they're ready to do so. And I think getting broader experience early in your career can, one, help you just make sure that you're making the right choice in terms of where you want to focus, but also it can help you to just broaden your skill set as well. I remember being told as a trainee, get some litigation experience, even if you've got no interest in doing it long term, because actually getting that perspective on what it looks like from the other side of the spectrum when things go wrong will help make you a better transactional lawyer. So I think early on for me, it's about having as broad a base of experience as you can get. But as you become more experienced, as you're heading towards partnership, I think it's developing that niche and that expertise that kind of makes you stand out from the next person.
I think I want to talk, because you say there that it's good for a junior lawyer to have broad experience. And yeah. I've noticed since I've been in this industry now 12 years, the newly qualified market has changed so much. I remember back 5, 6 years ago where I used to be so busy 2 times in the year with newly qualifieds flying around the market, people, individuals accepting a job and then at the very last minute changing. And there was so much movement. Now, there's not really that much of a massive NQ market because firms are putting so much more emphasis on retaining their NQs, which I must say is a smart thing, because why would you want to train someone for 2 years and then have them walk out the door? How do you balance the desire of a junior lawyer to want to go into their practice area versus the needs of the business? Because obviously you're going to have some practice areas which are very, very popular and
Yeah.
some which are less popular.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that real estate often gets a bad name, particularly people who study conveyancing at Scottish universities come out of it thinking that's the last thing they want to do. So we actually start with an image problem with our junior lawyers, and we've got a lot to do to kind of get them on side. And I often look at my colleagues in some of the other teams that are definitely more kind of fashionable, shall we say, in terms of specialisms that people want to get into, find that they have a queue of candidates. And we tend to run our kind of NQ process on the basis that all the roles are open to everyone. You're allowed to apply for whatever you want to, or not apply as you see fit. But if you put all your eggs in one basket, or actually decide that's what I want to do, we're not going to necessarily kind of force somebody to take another role, because you can't do that. We'll just go with something else in the market if they're unsuccessful. But we have also developed what we call our strategic secondment unit in Scotland. So part of our business has, partly in response to client demand, we've got this group of people. It's about half a dozen associates in the group at the moment. We're aiming to get it up to about 10 who are available effectively to go on client secondments to clients who we think would be strategically important to the growth of the business. And so as part of that, we tend to take on an NQ or perhaps two into that. And you're coming in effectively to a sort of broad sort of commercial contracts type environment. We've had people join that initially with a tech and media focus, then they've maybe gone to an opportunity with an energy company and decided, actually, I really want to be on the energy side of the business. And we've accommodated them when they've come back in that. So I think we've tried to find ways to kind of create flexibility at that level. But yeah, ultimately, you will leak people through that NQ process who want to join a particular team and can't get into that team, and we end up with vacancies we have to go to the market with in other teams. That's just kind of part of the process, unfortunately. But thankfully, we've done well this year in terms of retention rates in Scotland. We've gone out to the market for a number of vacancies, and happily we've filled most of those.
You touched on secondments. I know that you spent, I think, the best part of 4 years working in a secondment to a major utility company. In-house is one of our probably top 3 inquiries that we have, is about secondments, about in-house. So many questions about in-house in general. What was your time like on secondment, and what did it give you versus, if you just be in private practice the whole time? Because a lot of people might be thinking, oh, do I want to go and do that in-house? Is that going to be right for me? Is it perhaps going to hold me back in terms of getting to where I want to do, not being in the law firm?
I think a secondment or certainly a brief spell in-house early in a career is massively valuable. So when I moved to London, we had a utility company client, as you say, who was looking for somebody on a part-time basis. So I did it on a variety of, it was 3 days a week for a while, then it was 2 days a week, then it was 1 day a week for about 2 years before I finally I think it was when I made partner, I kind of said to them, I think this needs to stop, guys. But, I learned a huge amount about what it's like to be on the receiving end of client service and what it's like to receive advice, and then working out what to do with it as a client and how to navigate the sort of internal aspects of getting decisions made. And I think as a private practice lawyer, I think having that experience, that sense of, thinking about how your advice is going to land, how do you make it useful for people? How do you make it easy for them to make a decision off the back of it? How do you make sure your advice is clear? That I think those are lessons that were really ingrained in me when I did my secondment. And so if anybody comes to me and says, should I do one? I always say yes, because I think in even 6 months with a client, you would learn a huge amount just about what life's like on the other side.
So I want to come on to, your position at the moment and what you
Yeah,
do. So you've been at CMS since 2014, and
yeah.
after not a great deal of time there, well, 4 years, I suppose. To some people that is a long time, but you then uh, were promoted or took the role to head up the office. Talk us through kind of was that an aspiration for you at the start? How did it come about?
Yeah, so I was joint managing partner of Dundas and Wilson before we combined with what was CMS Cameron McKenna back in 2014. So I'd been on the board of Dundas and Wilson from 2010 to 2014, and obviously stepped away because someone else was already managing partner of the firm. And I kind of led the real estate practice in the Glasgow office for that time, and then I took on the role of managing director for the Scotland part of the business in 2018. I think part of that was about well, for the firm, it was the fact that I had the track record in running the Scottish offices of our predecessor firm. And I think for me, it was about a bit of a new challenge. I had been in the firm for a long time. Obviously, it's changed massively in the time that it's been there. We've been an independent Scottish firm. We're part of one of the big five accountancy firms in the early 2000s until that all went the wrong way. We became an independent firm again, then became managing partner, then we merged. And I kind of appreciated that time just to be back looking after clients primarily. But after a while, I was probably getting a little bit twitchy and a little bit looking for just a bit of variety in terms of what I do. So the way I see my managing director role, it's almost like being a managing partner, but without all the kind of boring bits, like when the VAT's due and kind of what our kind of partner capital looks like, and have we got enough money to pay everybody at the end of the month. Someone else worries about that. And what I look after is the overall performance, the culture, and the kind of the development of the firm in Scotland, as I say, without some of the more painful parts of being a managing partner.
You know what? It sounds like they're still very hard subjects and
Yeah,
areas to be covering in themselves, because culture is a very hard thing to change, develop, and to keep a happy culture. What are you most? I'm putting you on the spot now. What are you most proud of since you've been heading up the Scotland office? Is there anything that stands out to you, sort of looking back in over the years?
yeah, another good question. I think one of the things that after a merger happens in a firm is you spend a lot of time integrating. And we spent a lot of time integrating across our practice groups. And when I became MD in 2018, a sort of natural stage of evolution of the firm, it felt like the people in the offices in Scotland were much more connected to their colleagues in London than they were with each other. And
Mm.
so I kind of saw a sort of real missed opportunity in terms of, if we come together and we're a collegiate group of partners and we go after opportunities together, we're going to be a much stronger business here in Scotland. And so a lot of my focus has been on that since, so we introduced 6 monthly partner meetings. We get together in the offices once a fortnight. We've got a lot of initiatives that are about bringing partners together to talk about client opportunities. And I think that's been really transformational in terms of building the confidence around who we are as a brand and kind of our ability to sell our message in the market, because we've got the confidence in each other. And so, I often say to people when we talk about collaboration that you don't really start with collaboration, you start with trust. And the only people you can trust are the people that you know. And so we put a lot of effort into that. And I think, our success, we've had 6 years of consecutive growth. The business is almost double the size that it was 6 years ago in Scotland. And I think that is partly down to just building that sense of confidence, collegiality, and trust across the partner group. And that's something I think I never take for granted. We're always looking at new ways in which we can continue to foster that. But for me, that's been a massive part of our success. And I'm really, really proud of what we've done there.
It's funny, isn't it, when you say that? Because I can understand why the Scottish office might have felt more connected to London than Scotland, but it still sounds mad when you say it
Yeah,
like that, doesn't it? But I can totally understand why that might have been the case. I'm going to take you on another question now of
sure.
self-reflection and back in time. If you could give the Allan of 2014 some words of advice, with the benefit of
2014.
well,
You're not going all the
I
way
was
back
trying
to
to
the
think.
80s, are you?
Well, we could go back to the Allen of 1996, but I thought maybe 2014 was a nice place to sort of pivot the question.
Yeah, I would have said if you'd asked me about 1996, I would have said don't become a Scottish property lawyer because you then jurisdictionally constrain yourself from bigger international opportunities. But actually, I've had an amazing time in terms of my kind of client's career and all that sort of stuff. So I say that kind of partly in jest, but we often talk in the office about how being a Scottish property lawyer is very much putting yourself in a bit of a box because those skills really aren't very transferable to any other country. Although I did re-qualify in England a couple of years later. What would I say to 2014 me? Gosh, I really don't know. I mean, I think there was definitely a sense of the aftermath of being managing partner, going through a combination. I was also really busy with client work at the time. I was just kind of grateful for a bit of a break, and I think we did all the right things in that period because we did have to properly feel like we were part of the bigger firm, and we've always got to balance that sense as a regional part of the business that you're not becoming territorial about things. You are fully integrated, but we need to have our Scottish identity. So we definitely kind of didn't prioritise that. But I don't regret not prioritising that. I think my sense of it is we got to that at the right time when we got there in sort of 2018 to say this was a natural moment of evolution for us to move back to feeling like a big Scottish firm, which I think is where we're now trying to position ourselves.
Obviously, it's hard being at the top of any business, Alan. It is difficult at times, having to make tough decisions. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges of leading, a large office for an international law firm? For
Yeah,
you personally?
I often describe myself as upper middle management rather than the top of the firm, given that I do have a boss, but in our managing partner. But yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people below you, Alan, would look at you as the top.
Yeah, that's true. It's a complicated business. No, big international law firms are complex, and I think one of the biggest challenges is how to navigate that and how you build relationships in a firm with 8,000-9,000 people in it and make sure that we are plugging into the right parts of it. I think for me, when you're in leadership in a regional part of a business like ours, it comes back to building relationships. I'm not sitting in Scotland sort of moaning about how we're an afterthought. It's always about London, and it's so the way that I deal with it is just build really good relationships with the decision makers, make sure that the practice group leaders based in London know me and know what Scotland's all about. The heads of all the big support departments like HR, finance, business development all know what Scotland's about, and I've got a good personal relationship with them. And I think for me, that's been a real learning that it's a completely different environment from the one that we were in. Because if you're running a independent Scottish firm, you don't have to worry about that dynamic because everyone's reporting to you. Whereas in a bigger, more complex business, everyone's reporting to lots and lots of different people. And I think it's just about making those personal connections and building those relationships. I think that's important, and encouraging everyone else to do the same.
How do you make an assessment on culture when a firm is that big? How do you sort of try and get a sense of, what the overall feel is? Do you break it down into departments and go down? Or do you try and how do you manage that? Because I'm just trying to think, wow, that many people, how do you, because like you said, the Scottish office itself has doubled in size. How have you managed to maintain, or has the culture had to change?
So, well, a firm like Wide Level, we're really clear on who we're trying to be, in terms of the kind of proposition for our people. We're very much a trust-based organisation that kind of puts trust over rules. We put diversity and inclusion very much at the heart of our thinking. We try to be inclusive, we try to be collaborative. So that's kind of sets the kind of overall scene. So I have 3 office managing partners, one for Aberdeen, one for Edinburgh, one for Glasgow, who report into me, and their remit is very much about looking after the kind of culture of the the offices and making sure that those feel like friendly, inclusive, warm environments. I often say to candidates who I'm interviewing that I'm the last person to ask about culture, because I'll tell you it's great because I'm leading it, and of course I'm going to tell you that. But go and speak to your friends and the people that you know who already work here, and they'll tell you about it. But I genuinely believe, we put first the idea that we're creating a safe and comfortable environment for people to work, that they can bring their whole selves to work. And I often say to people that you've got to have fun when you come to the office. It's not all about coming in with your nose to the grindstone and getting the hours down and getting the work done and looking after the clients in their way. It's a hugely social environment if you let it. And I think if it feels social, it just feels a bit more, it almost feels like the sort of place that people want to be. And if you create a place that people want to be, we're going to be a better business. We're not creating a good culture just for the sake of having a good culture. It makes good business sense to do that.
We all want to work somewhere where we enjoy
Yeah.
going into the office. I think that was always my drive. When I started my company, I wanted it to be fun. Obviously, there is a time and a place to be
Yeah.
knuckling down, but you want to enjoy what you do. We spend so much time at work at the end of the day. I want to come on to Scotland now
Yeah.
in more detail. So, how has the Scotland market changed, let's say, in the last 5, 10 years? Well, what changes have you seen? Because obviously, I'm guessing one of the biggest things is Brexit and obviously Scottish energy. But that's just my opinion. I'm not in Scotland, Alan. You're going to know better than me.
Yeah, well, the last 10 years have obviously seen quite a lot of consolidation. A lot of Scottish names, like our own, has been absorbed into bigger firms. You've seen, I think if you go back to 2014 when we had the independence referendum, I think that had a big impact on Scotland in terms of deal flow at the time. It probably caused a bit of inertia for a period whilst the outcome of that was known. I wouldn't say that Brexit necessarily of itself has had an impact on the overall business environment in Scotland. I mean, I think if you speak to particular sectors like the food and drink sector, for example, the kind of exporting rules and the relationship with the rest of Europe, is significantly impacting them. But if you look at kind of business activity overall, I don't think that of itself has had much of had an impact. I mean, Scotland's taxed more highly than the rest of the UK. I think that's a big challenge at the moment. The economy here feels in the sense that kind of attracting and retaining top talent, not just in professional services, but in the health sector and the energy sector as well. I think is a big issue. Something I think the Scottish government's got to have a look at without obviously being political about it. But it's just a fact. Higher taxation has an impact on people's decisions about where they want to work. The move to renewables and the kind of confusion around kind of government policy on that and the changes in government policy over the last couple of years probably has had quite a material impact, both at a Scottish and at a UK level, because we've obviously got the joys of having a Scottish government as well as a UK government. So we've got to cope with the complexities of all of that. And the Aberdeen market in particular has probably seen some effect around that uncertainty. But that, oil and gas will be around for a bit to come. We as a business have been heavily invested in the renewable sector for a long time. And so that energy transition journey for Scotland is one where a business like ours is really well placed. And there's going to be lots of opportunities, but there are still kind of lots of uncertainties out there around that.
Do you think Scotland will be leading the way in terms of green energy?
Well, I think they already do in many respects. And I think that's partly been driven by just the geography and the weather in Scotland. But I think it has been driven by that sort of innovative spirit and that sort of government policy over the last decade or so about kind of investing in renewable sources. So, I do think we are a leader on that. I think what we need to do is try and make sure that we kind of bottle that and kind of export it in the way that we have done historically with our oil and gas expertise.
What predictions, if any, or trends do you think that we're going to be seeing over, if you were to look into your crystal ball, Alan, and try and make some predictions for us on what's to come, would you say that where would you say we're going over the next couple of years? Is there anything that you think we should be keeping our eye on?
In what sense?
I guess any predictions in the market in terms of sectors, in terms of Scotland, in terms of impact of technology on the legal sector?
Yeah, it's interesting. We haven't really spoken about technology, have
We
we?
haven't, and
And
I'm trying to weave as much into this as I possibly can, Alan. I'm trying to
yeah,
get as much for the listeners as I can here. I'm taking you on a wild journey across many different aspects here.
yeah, so I have a bit of a sales pitch to my colleagues on legal tech that we are part of a massive law firm and we are a relatively small percentage of that, but we've got the investment capability in AI and technology that actually a number of our local competitors just can't match, and so there's a real kind of opportunity to differentiate there if we can actually harness that well in our local market and bring that to our client community based here in Scotland. I think one of the challenges you've got is there's so much noise around things like AI. I remember hearing lots of doomsayers 9, 12 months ago saying that the world's going to look very different in 12 months' time and that's going to have a massive impact on the legal profession. And it kind of hasn't happened yet. It's not to say it's not going to happen, it's not happening to some degree, but I think the change is more gradual and more complex than was maybe being initially predicted. So that's something that's very much in our minds, and we've got a group specifically looking at that through the Scotland lens of how we can bring to bear the benefits of being a big law firm and the kind of investment that we can make as a business to the benefit of our clients here in Scotland.
Interesting. I just want to ask a couple of last questions. So, I personally, and your view might be different from my view. I don't think universities do enough to prepare people for what the real life is like outside of the university environment. I make that observation and that statement as a result of coming across a lot of graduates who just aren't aware of what the reality of life is really like. So, with that in mind, what advice would you give to someone at university now that wants to perhaps work for a firm like CMS and, get a training contract? What can they do to stand out?
Yeah, so I mean, first I would say about the universities that it's probably for the private practice industry to actually engage better with the universities about what we need from graduates and what kind of skill set we think they're going to need for the future. So I think that's an important part of the conversation. We can't blame the universities. We've actually
Yeah,
got
that's very good point. Very
but in
good
terms of
point.
the candidates themselves, I quite often say to people, and when we have people into the office who are interested in joining us, in terms of what I think they ought to focus on. I think obviously, doing well at university and getting good grades is part of it, but showing that sort of interest in kind of how it all works and how we can deploy technology, how we can be innovative, I think for me would make people stand out. I don't think we have in the industry yet enough people that can blend the kind of technical legal skills with the sort of technical processing and IT skills to actually sit in the middle of that and provide the most efficient, effective service. I think those people that combine both those skill sets are actually quite unique still. And I think that's a bit of a shame. And I think it's something that will develop because it needs to develop. But I think people who now are thinking about what they need to do and what they need to focus on, not neglecting the kind of tech side of it, just because you know how your iPhone works and just because you know how to kind of navigate the various apps on your phone doesn't make you an expert on using technology. And I think it's looking for opportunities to develop those skills. I think certainly for the next 10 years would make you quite a small but important minority in terms of what we're looking for, and I think would actually help people to kind of turbocharge their career if they were able to blend those things.
I think you make some really interesting points there. And finally, I'm going to ask you one more advice question.
Okay.
And this is more aimed at people who've qualified but want to, there's going to be people listening to this who want to be a partner. They want to get to partnership in a nice kind of, nice fashion, not taking the scenic route, Alan, so to speak. What would be your advice to people that want to get there and don't want to be overlooked?
I I think I kind of said earlier about
You did touch on it.
building relationships. And I think being patient, you know, if you take somebody who's kind of is a mid-level 5-6 year qualified associate, then you've still got a few years to, you know, to kind of get to a position where you would have a strong business case for promotion. And I would say that the idea of building out your own network, making sure you're in an environment where you're encouraged and enabled to do that, I think is really important, because if you're not in that, how are you possibly going to stand out? How are you going to, you know, help grow the business? I think showing some awareness of the how a law firm works and getting interested in the numbers, I think, is important, you know, and that's something that I think quite often people leave until quite late. It would be better to kind of get yourself au fait with how all that works as early as you possibly can. And then back to that point I made about finding that USP, what differentiates you from the person sitting next to you doing exactly the same work for exactly the same clients, and show some interest in something that potentially could you know, win the firm some work in the future. But you know, for me, it all gets back to, you know, building that network, and you know that it is an old adage of people buy people, and you know, the more people that are in your network, and the better able you're to connect them, the better connected you'll appear, and the more likely you are to rise to the top of their priority list in terms of who they're going to call.
I think that's some very nice, very sound advice. Alan, thank you so much for coming on to the Legal Brew. I think we've covered a hell of a lot today, and I'm sure so many people are going to find this really useful. So thank you so much for sparing the time. And if you do want to find out more about Alan, you can go to the show notes where I'll have his LinkedIn profile, his firm profile. So just go over there. Alan, thank you.
Thank you.